Chris Ciulla, welcome to A Minute With. We are so happy to have you.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate it. It is a pleasure to work with you and awesome to be part of the program.
Again, we're so glad you're here. You have a fantastic knowledge base. Your career spans all kinds of interesting things, and that's one of the things I love about it. It's so representative of the path of so many people in this business. You have done film, you've done TV, you've done all those things, and you found an additional way to live a really successful career life in addition, in between those gigs, which is audiobooks. You've done over 425 titles. Is that correct?
That is correct. 431 we're working on right now. So we're very lucky for that.
Yeah, and you've been nominated for awards multiple times. You've won awards. You really know this area, and you went as far as to start your own production company around this. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. The evolution, when you have narrators who've worked, say, 250, 300, up to 400 titles, there's a bit of an evolution in the industry where you've developed a team underneath you. You have a post-production team that's under you. Maybe you have preppers. Maybe you have other virtual assistants or other people who are part of your production team. So the evolution is to become at least a producer. So the publishers in our industry, if we've built that trust with them, they want to be able to trust us because they want us to solve their problems. If they have an overrun of too many titles underneath their umbrella, they want to be able to contract certain people underneath them to be able to trust that they will be able to handle every aspect of that production and hand them back master files and be very confident that it's going to be a fantastic piece of work.
Yeah.
I've taken the next step beyond that, though, and I've become a publisher, too, which means I acquire rights for audio from a lot of books. And, that is truly the long game where you are. It's your job to get out there, not only make sure the book is fantastic from a production standpoint, but that it gets marketed properly for a prolonged period of time, and you find the listeners that are appropriate for that book and that genre.
So interesting. There's so much in everything that you just said that I have a million questions about. Because that is one of the things when someone's a master in an area like yourself, these terms and things are natural for you. But for those of us who are don't have your level of mastery or even familiarity, I'm so curious about what all these different elements you just named mean. Like, let's back up to your team. If you are starting out, you're just aspiring to be paid to use your voice to narrate an audiobook, right? But after you get going, how does a team develop and who is on the team and how do you find your team? What's a team?
Sure. So it's an excellent question. And it's something that a lot of newer narrators who aren't exposed to good coaching at the start of their career believe they're on an island. So they believe that they have to go out there and attack everything themselves and find where the work is themselves, apply, meaning audition for that work themselves, and communicate with a rights holder, maybe a small publisher or an author who still has their rights, to be able to basically produce that book in the way that we're doing justice to the author's words. One of the simplest things that people do is they try to not only become a good narrator at the beginning of their career, but they also think that they need to master the tech, which means they have to do their own mastering, their own editing of the project, of the actual audio. And as a coach, I implore people at the very beginning of their careers to find post-production people to subcontract underneath their own umbrella, meaning once they produce their raw audio for that particular project, they're passing it off to someone who is an expert in something else, who is an expert in proofing, finding all the mistakes within that particular project, and then sending back those mistakes to us. And then we do the pickups, those fixes for those mistakes, and then they'll lay them back in and do the editing. They will edit that and make sure the heads and tails of the files are what they should be, that all the tech is, all the specs of the audio match what they should be for that particular distribution platform, and then the mastering, making sure it sounds wonderful and pristine within those specs. So there's our post teams that do this, that's their job. And a lot of narrators come into narrating and they think, oh my God, I've got to do this and that. No, you should be budgeting. budgeting originally for those things from the very beginning of your career. And I know we might take some financial hits along the way at the beginning, but this is the long game. Audiobooks is the greatest example of the long game in performance. There's no rush to the work, but once you get to the work, even while you're doing the work, concentrate on becoming a great narrator and let the other people who have the other aspects and who have those other skill sets, let them do what they do underneath you.
That's such valuable information. How does one go about finding a trustworthy, let's define post-production for people who don't know that. And then I want to touch on rights because that term would catch me if I didn't know. It means you got the permission to make this into an audiobook. You have the legal permission. Like no one can come along after you didn't say, I didn't say you could do that, right? Is that the correct description of what rights are?
Yes, basically, rights are you have the right to do whatever you choose to do within the contract on that for that particular project and for that particular title, for that particular we can use the term IP, intellectual property.
Yeah, I think contract is an important word there.
Sure.
Very important word there. How does one go about finding an engineer? Well, let's talk about what you mean by post-production and how you would find someone that you trust.
In audiobooks, post-production means three things, essentially proofing, editing, and mastering. So there are three different parts of the post-production process. So when we're in our studios it doesn't have to be an actual studio, could be a DIY, doesn't matter. But you've heard this term before. That really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything specific, called broadcast quality audio. That means that we can do a gig from home. That's pretty much all it means. Like, and especially with COVID, but even before that, people with home studios were able to work actual gigs from home with Source Connect and other forms of delivering files either in the moment or just recording from your own DAW, your DAW from home and sending those off and getting them off there. But if you have a quality home recording space with a low enough noise floor and a good mic and a good interface, you're going to be able to do gigs from home. So when we're done recording our principal audio, the raw audio that's going to eventually be turned into the actual audiobook, we have hopefully either with a punch and roll method, which means you're kind of restarting every time you make a mistake, but still sending off one solid track of audio. So punch and roll is a method that all narrators should learn at the very beginning of their career, how to narrate efficiently and save as much time and still have a great quality product. Mm. When we have that raw audio done, we send that off to our post producer and they will proof it, finding all the mistakes when they match up the manuscript with the actual audio. So we might mispronounce words, we might miss words, we might accidentally have cut a paragraph out that we didn't mean to. All of those will be on a dictated list, on a document. Usually we have a marked up PDF that we receive. And also we will receive an Excel spreadsheet that has the actual number of the pickup. It will have the time code from the actual chapter on the pickup, and it will have the description of what type of pickup it will be. And then we get those and we fix them. So we re-record all those mistakes, we send them back, and then the proofing is done. So proofing's done. Now it goes into editing. So then we take those fixes and place them back into the audio. So all those original mistakes are no longer on that track. We also need to make sure each distribution platform has different rules as far as for how long their page breaks need to be, what the heads and tails of the files need to have, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 1, maybe 3. So all those need to match. And then there might be some pops in the audio. There might be a little bit of noise that comes in at particular facets of the audio. If there's some ambient noise that has to be removed, so they'll remove all that stuff if it's heard in the edit. Then it will go to the mastering process where we bring in what we call a mastering chain. And I'm no expert on mastering, and there's a reason for that because I'm a narrator and now I'm a producer, so I make other people do this stuff that they're great at. However, there's basically three things that happen. There is a limiting, which makes sure that the file does not pop over, say, -3 dB, which is which gives a little bit of a window at the very top of the file for, so the audio does not peak when the volume is turned up on somebody's app or on a computer. It will be EQ'd, which means they'll take certain waves of the audio that is really superfluous. They'll remove that stuff, and then they'll compress it so that it is efficiently made into a smaller file that will match all the other files that go out onto whatever batch process and distribution platform you're dealing with. Yeah, blah, 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 blah.
That's a lot of work that goes into this. That's crazy. And you have to understand, okay, everything that you just described. If someone is just starting out or they're established in a couple places in their career, but they want to add this as an additional income stream, how much of that do they need to know just to get started? Like, do they have to know all that? That seems very intimidating.
It is risk versus reward. So the more you know, the less you'll be shocked at when it goes wrong. So you've got to, again, this is the long game. And we have a few platforms, what we would call marketplaces, where starting narrators can go and try to find work if they don't really know what they're doing per se and are not getting coaching to find those producers or publishers that are, potentially buyers of their skill set when it comes to what genres they do really well. So if people want to go out there and try to get the work, they can on their own. That's fine. But in these marketplaces that exist, like ACX, the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is under Audible, which is under Amazon, okay? But Audible is like the primary distribution player in audiobooks, and we all know this. The ACX, if you don't know what you're doing, it's the Wild West. It really is, because if you are an educated narrator, it's kind of your job to tell rights holders who are most of those rights holders who come onto ACX and try to find narrators to produce their audiobooks are first timers. So that means they've had this baby forever. They've had it for 6, 7, 8 years in some cases. And now it's finally self-produced as an ebook. So then they've gained that ability. And some of these books may not even be professionally edited. Some are not, because they couldn't afford that. They couldn't even jump into that. And if a book can't be professionally edited, what's the audio going to be like? What's that process going to be like? I would imagine that might be difficult in certain places. But you, as a narrator, as an educated narrator, would then go onto that platform. And when you're seeing very strange responses from rights holders who know nothing about the creation of audio, but want to create audio on this platform, it's up to us to educate them on how this works. So that's what it's all about. It's about even allowing these first timers to have a smooth process, because you're the pro coming in and you're the person that's going to help them out. And even if you have to be their de facto copy editor to fix some things on the fly, so be it. It will allow that process to be smoother because you're the educator.
That's powerful. And knowledge is power, as they say. Wow. How did you first step onto the audiobook path?
I started thinking about it. I'll tell you a little story. I was back in 2009. I was walking around a Barnes & Noble in, I think it was Woodland Hills. This is back in my LA days. So I lived in LA for 15 years, from like 02 to 16. And I'm walking around and I see these boxed plastic sets. And I'm like, are those CD sets? I'm thinking like monoliths from 2001, A Space Odyssey. And I'm like, what are these? And I look at one, and it's a John Grisham novel. And I believe it was The Street Lawyer, but I might be wrong. But I turn it over, and it says read by Michael Beck. And I'm like, Michael Beck? He was Swan in The Warriors. One of my favorite movies by Walter Hill about gangs in New York. Who killed Cyrus? And then he, I think he also did like some guest stars on Matlock in the 80s. But he also was he was the male lead in Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm like, what happened to Michael Beck? He became an audiobook narrator. So that was the first ting, the ding in my head to say, oh, that's a gig. And I was always the type of performer, because I did not have much success on camera, either in commercial or TV or film, because I was kind of like the everyman, and I was the unfortunate story of the everyman, where like I'm a 100% Italian guy. But you go, and they're, I would sound an agency, and like, he's our Italian guy. And then I go into all these Italian rooms of Italian guys, and I'm the least looking Italian guy in the room. They're like, I'm looking at all these guys, and they're like, oh, those guys are really Italian. Like I am too. I can do it vocally, but like, you look at me, I'm like, is he Black Irish? I don't know. So the versatility thing, I was always looking for another cookie jar of work to potentially, or earn union health insurance and potentially get vested years in the union. And by then I was in both unions. I was in both SAG and AFTRA, and we hadn't merged yet. So I said, okay, maybe this is a solve for like not having good commercial years. And then in 2011, I happened to pop into a workshop with Mark Cashman, who does some great stuff out in LA. And this was at Voice Tracks West. And forgive me, I don't remember who the person is. I think they were still Random House. They weren't Penguin Random House yet. But this is how bad I was, basically, at like gathering information. Night and day, obviously, compared to what now, teaching other people how to do it. I couldn't even tell you who that producer was from Random House that was telling me about audiobooks. But it's still embedded. The fact that it was like, okay, this is long form narration. It's storytelling. I'm a storyteller. I need to get into this world. So in 2012, I did enough research to learn from Pat Fraley, who puts on these wonderful weekend programs of all different categories. But he brought in Hillary Huber and Scott Brick, both of whom have not only become colleagues, but friends. And so I was in the environment of giants. And, we recorded some demos, learned some great things about the industry, and then I was off and running. I recorded a few auditions on ACX. This is back in 2013, though, like end of 2012, where ACX was only about 2 years old. So there were still some really fantastic independently released books that were becoming audio that were selling very well. And at that time, ACX was also had a lot of stipend jobs, which now you would consider to be like a hybrid job, where it's called what we call royalty share plus, where you're getting some money up front that pays for your post. And so they were guaranteeing $150 per finished hour plus royalties, which is a pretty good deal. And as a good deal if you want to go into a royalty share direction nowadays. So I auditioned for all these gigs, and I booked 3 in the same week.
Oh my gosh.
All stipends. And I don't have a studio. I don't have a mic. I don't even have a computer. I was working on an old laptop with a blue snowball mic, a USB mic right into my computer, working in GarageBand. Oh. And so I then had 3 gigs that had deadlines. And you're like, oh boy. So then I basically created my studio in my garage, a DIY space. I basically created a room within a room. And I, not knowing, I went to Guitar Center, bought a mic, bought an interface, bought my first duet. And I was extremely lucky to get somebody who was very malleable, who had a lot of engineering information that pertained to a lot of industries. So the stuff that he taught me actually worked for audiobooks. Very lucky to learn that. I could have gotten somebody who was not, randomly choosing someone to help you out. I got very lucky. And the gentleman that helped me, oh my God, I forget his name too. I'm terrible.
Did you go back and take him a coffee one day?
I should, right? I should.
Brief sideline. I have a similar, not similar, but somewhat similar story. My first job I ever auditioned for was a cartoon series. I'd never been allowed to watch cartoons. And I booked it, and I was dead sick before the job first session. I had like shingles and the flu, and I was like in my 20s. I was like, what is happening? It was just all stress, right? And I go to the pharmacy the night before the job, and I gathered everything off the shelves I could guess might help me. And I talked 90 miles an hour to this poor pharmacist, and I was like, okay, I have to sleep tonight, but I can't be congested, but I need to decongest it, and tomorrow I have to be awake. I can't, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, okay, crazy lady. And he just stopped. He goes, take this tonight, take this tomorrow. And for years, and I made it through the session. Marsha Goodman only said, it's very phlegmy cough when I coughed. I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't get fired as I was terrified I was going to be fired every week. But for years, when I went back to that pharmacy, he was there. I would go, thank you so much. And he's like, oh my God, crazy lady, leave me alone.
You saved me.
Yes. Yeah.
Saviors.
So those people who are just doing their jobs, who save us they're the best. Okay. So you do these three at once, nothing like baptism by fire. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And then, I didn't know enough. So we didn't go over, though, any of the tech stuff. There was no tech stuff that I learned from anybody yet. And there weren't that many coaches then that taught that. Like, so the Uncle Roy's, they weren't within my existence yet. Like the Don Barnes,
Tell people who those guys are.
These are people who just have expertises in particular DAWs, in particular DAWs. So Uncle Roy is known as the Adobe Audition guy. Don Barnes is the Studio One guy and has kind of matched Studio One and done a lot of stuff as far as for workshopping Isotope RX. Like he's excellent at teaching you how to work that program if you want to do some cleansing of your files from home. And there are the George Whittam, those types of people. Like they weren't in 2013 in Jan 13 or December 12. I had no idea who these people were.
Yeah, George is now available through SkillsHub. He's on. All his stuff is housed on our platform.
But we have these experts, and then there's Reaper experts. We have I don't know if it's Romick or Romick. There's James Romick and Jennifer Blom are known as our Reaper experts that we have in the industry. So now you depending on what DAW lane you go down, as long as that DAW is able to punch and roll, you have sort of your choice of. If you have any engineering background at all, you should probably go with Reaper. If you're just like a Mac person that likes presets, you should probably go with Studio One. If you have the Adobe suite somewhere in your family and someone's paying that $52 a month to have it, you should be using Audition because it's already part of it, Or if you're the old school person that, has worked in the same studio forever since 2005, you're going to Pro Tools. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so these are, but there are options now, for all the people out there.
For people who aren't familiar with the term DAW, it's digital audio workstation.
Yes.
It's how you record your voice onto a track. It's the tools and the software that you choose to use to do that. Yeah. Oh my God. That's so intricate. There's so much to it. There's more than just, you can show up and just be a hired gun to speak, which I have done, but it's not as often. Is that correct?
Well, it's all you need to do. It's like sort of the preset phase. Like, so all you've got to do is make sure everything works. And the button that you press is actually the button that you press. And if you, and you just need that beginning tutorial on how to punch and roll. Once you do that, you will then take your acting skill and your acting skill set and wrap it around and with your tech method during your sessions. And so once you start to work a month in that format, 2 months, you'll start to gain your workflow and then you'll become a more efficient person. All you need to know is your presets and to have that person on call when your system crashes. That's what you need because they happen. It happens. We don't have to be pure engineers. We only need to be the very, very most basic of an amateur engineer to know when something goes wrong. The other great thing about working on all these DAWs is for some of them, there are like 5 people online in Facebook groups that as soon as you post a problem, they want to be the one. They want the credit. They want like the badge of honor that helps you get through that process. So like that's a great thing as far as for social media. There's lots of crappy things about social media, right? But this is one of the great things about being an audiobook narrator in social media. You got a problem with your DAW, someone's going to be able to help you right away.
Yeah. In addition to the incredible depth of knowledge you have around production, around the technical side of this, around the business side of this. I mean, we haven't even touched on that. You have such a massive business knowledge, how to get started, how to run it, how to make it work for you. You have, underneath all of this, a really strong, thriving acting background. I mean, you're one of Bethesda's go-to people. You've been in every Fallout game since New Vegas.
Sure.
You
helps.
still continue to do on-camera and work, and you weave a lot of character stuff through you do the audiobooks where you've got to do characters. What's one of the biggest mistakes you see people making in audiobooks where you have multiple characters to play, for example?
One of the most, probably for newer narrators, the most expected mistake is to think that the listener needs a lot of separation between particular characters. That listener requires, and for my true acting people out there, forgive the terms, these are just macro terms. You go big, right? People go big. And it's important to know that even when we go into, say, a high fantasy genre or a lit RPG genre, all the characters believe they're real. Everybody believes they're real. And you know this, all the characters in animation and video games, those characters believe they're real. They don't know anything about anything else other than who they are and that world that they live in. So that allows us to ground everything that we ever do. And so it's this expectation that all these listeners need me to throw my voice and create something different to the detriment of the storytell and the reality of the moment. And so we can't ever lose the reality in the moment. You have to be in the moment the entire book. That's the biggest challenge of narrating. That's the exhausting part of it. Not only everyone talks about, I can only use my voice for 2 hours or 3 hours and then I'm done. I don't know how these narrators do it for 6, 7, 8 hours and can put out, 3 finished hours a day. Trust me, the voice stuff, we clear the throats, we get that stuff done. We figure out a way to do that. It's the brain. That's where it gets exhausting because we're on. And that's that's the great thing about long form storytelling, because I am in the moment all day long, like literally all day long. Like there's no one going, cut, Chris, go back to holding, get back to your trailer, hang out there, none of that stuff. This is, I'm on until I go to lunch. I'm on until I got to take a phone call or whatever and step out of my booth, whatever the case may be. I'm on this whole time, on. And so it's, but I would say that, the expectation, I would say they need to start to know the expectation of the listener in those particular categories. And then we match that up to the copy, because sometimes obviously we have outliers that are asking for something very strange from a particular genre, so be it. But you want to know what the expectation is of the listener in the category and the genre that you're working in.
Yeah. The first audiobook I ever did was over 880 pages, and it had 50 some characters, and it was science fiction. So it was, and one of the beings to voice was an alien race of sort of jellyfish creatures.
Sure.
So finding the sound for that was really, I had the great fortune to chat to the author for a while, Christopher Paolini, who's brilliant, and find that. But that immediate huge respect for audiobook narration, like, woo!
Speaking of jelly characters, so I had a jelly character. I think his name was Geltor. I'm pretty sure, in a series called Vigilante, which is a great series written by Natalie Gray and with Michael Anderle, and it came out for Dreamscape, and it's 7 books. a terrific space opera sci-fi. It's just really, really nice. And Barnabas is a terrific lead. But Geltor, you're trying to find whatever. Like it kind of lends itself to getting back in your throat if you're thinking jelly.
Yeah. Where do you place that? And then keeping it consistent. I had this running tag. Yeah, I have this running log of voice memos on my phone, and I put the abbreviation for the book in the front of every single name of every voice, so I could just rip through and find like, okay, there's 50 of these. Which one of these 50 is this? And I have 3 iterations for a couple of them, and like, which one did we pick? So rely on the team in those moments.
And what you just said, and so when we teach the character class for under SkillsHub, that's one of the things we talk about, how to file those away, and where in your process you grab those clips and how long they should be, how to categorize them, how to file them, all that kind of stuff.
And they are life-saving. Teaching that is such a gift. If you could go back in time and speak to young Chris, the actor, what would you say?
Oh, goodness. I would say, it's I think it's just kind of a miracle that I inherently knew this, but it's something that I said in an interview last week, and people posted it all across the board on social media, and I was like, oh boy, that resonated. Stay. Just stay. Because I've had a ton of bad things happen to me in performance that I think for some people, so I persevere. I think that's my skill set. I will persevere through relatively bad things that happen to us in the performance medium. So on camera, VO, audiobooks, I've had some really crappy things happen. A lot of things that not only you're not in control over, but you don't expect. Come out of nowhere and just whoa. I will tell everyone, even through those, just stay. Last. Find a way to stay in the game. If you find a way to stay in the game, that's the only way you're going to book. That's the only way you're going to stay. That's the only way you're going to be in the moment, acting, fulfilling that purpose. It is, because this can be emotionally harrowing. Let's not lie to people. This is when, especially nowadays online, when say you pop on a Clubhouse session and you're hearing people chat, and those people, there are people who talk about how much they work. Talk about how much they work, and you feel like you need to compare yourself to them. There are people who and there's nothing wrong with that. There isn't. I'm not saying those people, because everyone has their own affirmation systems that they need to survive, that they need to do what I'm talking about, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So I don't want people to misinterpret that. However, our human nature is to go, why are they doing what I'm not? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And I will tell everyone, just start to, and this is a term that, trust me, do not walk away from it. Comfort it. Find your brand. Locate your brand. Know what your brand is. We each have a perception that we give off for particular things. It's important to know what that is, even if it isn't what we want to do, but it's the way to gain power in our career, in whatever category you're working in, from the start, to know what your brand is. And if you are all over the place, choose some things to focus on that you think you could perform best, and stay with that for a while until you start to gain a little bit of industry power. And then the relationships that you create, you'll be able to ask and then mosey on into those things that you kind of want to do. You'll get there eventually. But just to circle all the way back, stay.
That's beautiful. Excellent perspective. I remember when I was first in LA, well, I'd been there for a while, but early in my career, I took a course with a man who's no longer on the planet, Sam Christensen.
Sure.
And
I met Sam.
Yes, Sam was lovely. And one of the exercises we had to do was go to the airport in teams of 2, and we had surveys. It was back in the day, and we had paper surveys, like 30 pieces of paper we had to have somebody fill out. And if your partner was sort of on, they would stand over there and you would point to them and ask random people to go, "Hi, can you check the boxes of words that you think apply to that person over there?" And we all collected our surveys and we came up with key phrases that described us. And later that informed like my VO demos and my very first demo I ever made in LA started out with, I think, 10 straight seconds of nothing but action sounds. And lo and behold, that has held to this day. And I've gotten to do other things because once you're in the door, especially in animation and some forms of voice acting, you can bring them 5 different voices. And so you get to start to step into diversity that way. That's such a beautiful way to phrase it. Just stay. That's lovely. Oh, Chris, you have so much to share with people. What is it about coaching people? What drew you to that? What drew you to sharing what you know with people?
I've always been a coach. So I was a coach starting at about 12 years old. At 12, I was coaching basketball at our local rec center. I was coaching 7-year-olds at our local rec center, the Bullets, and then I was a tennis coach in our summers at 12, 13 years old. So it's sort of something that always embedded in me as like a very young starting skill set. How to motivate, how to teach particular physical or mental things in order to play better and be in a better mental state for particular games and sports. And then back in 2008, 2009, my dad got sick in Boston. He has since obviously it'll be 10 years next month that he's not around anymore. But back then, he had a bout with cancer, and I wanted to figure out a way to get back to Boston more often and at least monetize and make it worthwhile for from a business perspective. So I developed a program called Actors to LA, which was originally to teach actors who, let's take an example, someone in Boston, which then was really a small market because they didn't yet, I think, have the same tax incentive they have now. They've been really busy for about 10 years, I think, for film-wise, but back then it was just starting. But so there were a lot of like actors that wanted to become working actors in a large market. So I developed an entire weekend program of teaching newer actors how to find the work locally, what kind of jobs, either industry-centric or non-industry-centric, they should have to accentuate a burgeoning career in performance, and then teach them like when they should jump to the big market. And once they get to the big market, what are the agents to go for first? When is too early? When is just right? All the different categories of work they can get, yada, yada, yada. So I did that for almost 5 years until my dad passed away. But we did that in Miami. We did that in Albuquerque. It almost went fully national. And we just weren't monetizing enough. But that was a blast to travel, to go around with some, and I brought a casting director in a lot of towns with me too, to be able to do either, on-camera commercial, on-camera TV, on-camera film. We brought some voiceover people too. Just a really well-built program, but just I didn't have the resources to be able to bring it to the next level at the time. Yeah. But that's what embedded all of the coaching of adults and getting them to a place where they were able to succeed and giving them the information that was the right information. So I did a lot of aggregation. I learned how to aggregate data then and learn what was crap and what was good. And so I've gone through that whole process. So before I started coaching in audiobooks, I had gone through that whole process. So now this isn't the first time I'm going in here and aggregating all this information. I am now like tried and true, proven to like get this information and weed out the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. So like when people learn about demos from me, how long they should be in audiobooks, this is not something that is my opinion. Yeah. It's not. It is an aggregated piece of data. Are there outliers? Yes. But I'm going to give you 2 points of data, and you are interpolating if you're inside it, and you're extrapolating if you're outside of it.
So useful. That's the other thing I love about your knowledge. It is absolutely executable, practical, useful, and will move people ahead, which is why we're here. Thank you so much, Chris. We could talk all day. I'm, again, very, very happy you're with us. I cannot wait for people to connect to you and benefit from your vast, vast body of knowledge. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I'm just like everybody else, too. You know, we, a lot of us are, you know, we're dual people. We got guns on both sides. We're still performing. We're still in it. You know, and that's, you know, it's a double-edged sword, right? It really is, because, you know, sometimes you just want to put everything down and you just want to pursue the other thing, right? You just want to find the other thing. Like if I had a chance to be a series reg on TV right now, like would I just jump in? Of course I would. Of course I would. But I'd always circle back to this. You know, like this is life, this is love. I'm very lucky to have found this after being a quote-unquote struggling actor for a very long time. And I do it because I want other people to, you know, at least not waste time. You know, just because there's a lot of time you can waste just kind of spinning around, either boots on the ground, either virtually or in your own head. All of those places have like those laps you can do where it's just you're swimming to nowhere. And I would just like you to, in increments, in the right increments, understanding that it's always the long game, right? There's no rush. Don't rush in there. But let's get you the right information efficiently.
And we are so glad you were here to do that. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I look forward to talking again.
Yeah, thank you. And I so appreciate you bringing me into the program, and it's a pleasure. Thank you.